Well, hello everybody, and welcome to my show. My name is Jason DaCosta, and this is Consistent Preterism. Thank you for joining me. All I do is win, win, win no matter what. Got money on my mind. I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the club, I think he says, all the hands go up. How's everybody doing out there? It's been a while, man. It has been a while. I don't even know the last time I shared a little video / offering on this little YouTube we got here, but it's been quite some time, probably a few months. I just wanted to check in. I don't know how regular it'll be, but I did have something to share that a friend had messaged me about, and I wanted to kind of talk about it. But before we get into that, just wanted to say hi to everybody. Hope everybody's doing well out there. I have been extremely busy. I have been, taking on a new kind of role at my day job, which has been great. Very busy, but just kind of, staying super busy on that front, as well as our, investment properties and Airbnbs and all kinds of stuff, along with the new baby girl who's going to be a year old in a couple of weeks. And yeah, so just a lot going on. I'm building another house in Rhode Island, and I'm basically general contracting that. So a lot of stuff going on. So that's why I haven't had much time to, put into making videos or even just thinking about them for that matter, because, I roll around in my truck like I'm doing now, and I yap about it. So it's really not a big production, but it still takes time to think and ponder, and it does take energy to spew these things forth for your listening pleasure. So, with that said, hope everybody in the IO camp is doing well. Hope everybody outside of the IO camp is doing well. If you're on the fence of the IO camp, I hope you're doing well. And everybody who thinks that IO's nonsense, I hope you're doing well too, because, it's not, and it's true. And the more you think on it, the more it bothers you. For instance, I have a fella named Daniel Dang. I call him Danghead. He comments every once in a while, and he hadn't commented in probably, 6 months to a year. And, you think, oh, this guy hates IO. He's constantly trying to defeat it and disprove it, and he goes away. So you think, all right, he must have just given up. IO's a lost cause. He went on to preach the gospel and, share the good news of Christ and do things that are, worthy. But nope. He checked in again the other day and had to let me know how awful IO was. And actually, he was way back in the video archives. He wasn't even like in one of the recent ones, which says that he's obviously, searching through and listening to old material, which means that it's plucking at his conscience. It's sort of, saying, hey, I'm here. I'm true. Come listen some more. And so that's good to see. It's always good to see the haters and detractors listening to the content, because it's getting to them. And the reason why I was sort of prompted to make this video today is because a friend of mine, Michael Brass-Knuckle Bradley, those of you know him as a debater. He's an IO proponent. He defends the IO gospel very well. And he's actually writing a book. I think it's like a 700-page book all about IO. And, his take on it, his view on it, he's certainly IO. The main tenets are the same. I'm sure we differ in, minor points, just like everybody does. But he's going to release a book that will be full of information regarding IO. And Michael's the type of guy that, he's not going to half-ass it, if you will. He's going to do it, full tilt. And he's going to make sure that it's done well and properly. So I look forward to that. I don't know when it's actually going to be released. It's a major work, but I will, let you know once I know. And the reason that Michael contacted me is because he was apparently going back and forth with Dr. Bart Ehrman, the famous, scholar, professor, whatever you want to call him. I think he's a professor down in North Carolina at a university, but he is a atheist, from what I understand, maybe, I don't know. But he I believe he rejects Jesus as being a real figure, maybe, or maybe he thinks Jesus is a real figure, but he doesn't believe he's, a God figure. I'm not really sure. Honestly, I don't pay much attention to these guys, honestly. I feel like guys like him and Richard Carrier, and others of the like, are really just sort of making a career out of strumming along. In other words, they've clearly all heard the tenets of IO, and they clearly see the problems with what they believe, especially guys like Carrier, who believe that Paul was introducing a new gospel, like a universal type of, gospel for all mankind and everything. And, you show them the time limitators, you show them the time constraints, you show them how that mission was only for a short time and it was coming to a close, and it was for a specific people, for a specific purpose, to forgive them of their trespasses of a certain law that you and I never even so much as breathed upon. And yet they still ignore it. They still reject it. Sorry about that squeaking. That's my '06 Chevy Silverado. But yeah, they ignore it. So I think that these guys are, they're so entrenched in their careers, and, they probably do okay. I know Ehrman's a professor. I mean, why would they suddenly pick up and say, hey, you know what? I have it all wrong. No, they're not going to do that. It's an ego thing. It's a pride thing. These guys have been patted on their asses and backs all their lives saying, hey, good job, good job, good job. And then all of a sudden something comes and proves them all wrong. And of course, they're not going to just, sit down and agree. So Michael was, I guess, going back and forth with Ehrman on not on Romans chapter 1, but on IO in general. And I guess Ehrman made the fatal error of using Romans chapter 1 to prove a universal sort of gospel, to prove that this story was actually about, God sort of, overlooking everyone's mistakes and everyone's dishonoring of him and, forgiving them, as Romans 1 would seem to imply. But as we know, as IOers under a closer microscope, that is not at all what Romans 1 is implying. And I sort of mentioned to Bradley that, this sort of error that Ehrman made in his discussion with him is clear, or shows clearly, that they have no clue, right? Because if they would just look at other places, specifically Acts chapter 7 is where we're going to take a look today, you can see that Acts 7 is pretty much Romans 1 in a nutshell. But there's a problem, because Acts chapter 7 is not about the whole world, not at all. Acts chapter 7 is actually only about Israel. It's Stephen's addressing, and he's talking, and he's giving this sort of discourse, right? And he's speaking of whom? Who is he speaking of? He's speaking of only Israel. He goes right down the line, right through their history, and he talks all about them. And if you have an eye for it, if you're able to compare, or if you have time to do so, I highly suggest that you sit down with your Bible and you go through Acts 7 and you go through Romans 1. And I want you to make notes every time that you read something in Acts 7 about Israel and what Stephen says about Israel and what they've done in their history and what their patriarchs have done and what their ancestors have done. I want you to write it down. Make a little note, right? For instance, he starts off, he talks about the call of Abraham, okay? How Abraham had been called, and how his children would come from him. And then he goes forth in Acts 7 and it talks about the patriarchs and how they were sold into Egypt and how they were slaves in Egypt for 400 years. Write these details down. And then it talks about how they were, carried back and Abraham was laid in a tomb. And then it talks about God delivering them from Egypt by Moses, and bringing them out of Egypt. And let's see, talks about Moses' history. I'm just scrolling through here just to make sure I don't overlook anything. I mean, I've read this a million times, but it's going right through their history, right? And let's see. Then after 40 years had passed with Moses, an angel of the Lord appears to him. And when Moses saw it, he drew near and he said, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Moses trembled and dared not look. And the Lord said to him, take off your sandals. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their groaning, and I have come to deliver them. And now come, I will send you to Egypt, God says to Moses. And Moses, who they rejected, when he came into Egypt, they said, who are you to make you, who made you a ruler? And then it says that he delivered them, and Moses brought them out after he had showed them wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea and in the wilderness for a full period of 40 years. So look at that. God is showing these people wonders and signs in the land of Israel for 40 years. In Egypt and the Red Sea and in the wilderness for 40 years. He's showing them great signs and wonders, right? Does anybody recognize that language from Romans 1, right? And although they knew God, they didn't glorify God, and instead became foolish and darkened, and their hearts were blinded. And although he showed them great signs and wonders, they made a golden calf and worshipped it, and made a 4-footed beast and image and worshipped it. I mean, Romans 1 is literally Acts 7. Romans 1 is literally all about Israel's history. They made a golden calf. They worshipped it. They didn't give glory and honor to their God. This is precisely what it's talking about. And then Acts 7 goes on, and it says Israel rebels against God. Now check this out. He said, "This is the Moses who brought you up and will raise you as a prophet for your brethren." Again, the brethren is Israel. He says, "This is he who is in the congregation in the wilderness, blah, 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 whom our fathers would not obey, but rejected, and in their hearts they turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, 'Make us gods to go before us. As for Moses who brought us out of the land, we do not know what has become of him.' And they made a calf in those days, and they offered sacrifices to the idol, and rejoiced in the work of their own hands. And then God turned and gave them up to worship the host of heaven, as it is written in the book of the prophets." I mean, gave them up, worshiping the host of heaven, folks. God gave Israel up. Israel worshiped the golden calf. I mean, if you just look at Romans chapter 1, verse 18 and forward, check this out. Tell me this is not what I just read to you. Romans 1:18, "For the wrath of God is revealed against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his attributes have been seen, being understood in the things that are made. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him, nor were they thankful, but they became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools, and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man, and birds, and 4-footed animals, and creeping things." Hello, that is precisely what what was said by Stephen in Acts 7. "Therefore, God," this is Romans 1, check this out. "Therefore, God gave them up to uncleanness and the lust of their hearts, to dishonor their bodies, who exchanged the truth of God for a lie, and worshipped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. For this reason, God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged youths with blah, blah, blah. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased and dark mind to do things which were not fitting, being filled with all unrighteousness, malice, wrath, blah, blah, blah." So, folks, think about this. Here's Stephen going right through the history of Israel, talking all about Israel, talking about their patriarchs, talking about their history, talking about all the wicked things that they've done, how they turned on their God, how they rejected this God, how that God showed them glorious wonders and signs, and yet they still rejected him. This is what Acts 7 is all about. And if we look at Romans 1, certainly the language is a little different. Certainly the method used to describe this history is a little different, of course, because now this is Paul. This is somebody different. This is a different time. And of course they're going to use different methods of conveying the message. But if you look at the details and the contextual details, they are all the same. They are about a people who knew God, who once had God, who chose not to retain God, who chose to turn on God, who chose to worship 4-footed beasts and creatures, creeping things, who were darkened, who became, darkened in their minds and hearts, and God gave them up to this debased mindset and to this unrighteous attitude and demeanor. And I think that is precisely what Paul is talking about here. As a matter of fact, I know that is, because later on in Romans, Paul actually defines who these ones he's seeking out are. In places like Romans 9, they are the children of Israel. Romans 11, until all Israel be saved, the fullness of the nations will come in and all Israel will be saved. He's seeking out the Israelites. He's calling attention to Israel's wicked history, how they rejected their God, their one true God. And Stephen does much of the same in his discourse in Acts 7, talking about Israel's history, right on down from the patriarchs to Moses, and all the way forward to this guy named Jesus. So, folks, there is no question. Bart Ehrman has no clue what he's talking about. There's no doubt in my mind. If you ever want to body slam an argument, just show them Romans 1 and Acts 7. and compare the two. Write down the details, write down what it says, and I guarantee you they will look at you like you just gave up the ghost. Folks, I hope you enjoyed it. Little offering for you. Not sure how often this will be, but please do me a favor. Give it a like, a Rooski. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. Tell me to F off. Whatever you got to do. I really appreciate it. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.